What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Okay, there we are. We're finally back on Hooked with RBN, and the problem may be an issue of Skype. They were trying to contact me, and we're not able to do so. Part of the problem may be that Skype yesterday forced me to update the Skype on my machine, and they may not be compatible, which is kind of frustrating. But we're back on the air here, so aloha, welcome to our show. It's Wednesday, September 6th, 2017, middle of the week day, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauha on a Friday and another crazy weekend. And Mike in the control room is saying he hates Skype, and until something better comes along, we're going to have to live with it. But again, Mike, you might want to make sure you've got the latest update, because again, last night when I got off of Jim Goddard's show in Vancouver, it forced me to do an update, and it's just a lot of this nonsense we have to deal with because companies are putting out products that aren't actually in good shape, and their attitude is get it to market as quickly as possible, beat the competition, and fix the problems later on when they feel like it. All right, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and obviously the top story remains Hurricane Irma. It is just smashing the Caribbean islands as it heads toward the U.S. East Coast. Now, the latest storm track is showing the eye of the hurricane. Last night it was aimed right up the center of Florida. Now it's along that eastern shore. If it keeps shifting like that, then by the time the storm actually gets there, the eye of the hurricane will be offshore. But they're saying hurricane force winds are extending out 50 miles to either side of the eye. And to nobody's surprise, there's panic buying going on for storable food, water supplies. And if you're not already prepped for this, it may, in fact, already be way too late to get items that are going to be critical. Food, water, if you have babies, disposable diapers, toilet paper. Everybody seems to forget having extra toilet paper when you're coming up on one of these disasters. So the Virgin Islands have been hammered by Irma's 185-mile-per-hour winds, severe flooding from the storm surge, residents and vacationers trying to deal with it. Apparently, officials in the Virgin Islands are saying the electricity will not be fully repaired for the next 4 to 6 months, and they have started confiscating guns to prevent civil insurrection or looting or rioting here. And a lot of people are saying that if there was such a thing as a Category 6 hurricane, this would be it. And it is very strong and gaining in strength. Now, it still has not hit the mark set by Hurricane Patricia back in 2015. That was the second most intense tropical cyclone on record worldwide. It's the most powerful on the Western Hemisphere, but it was beat out by Typhoon Tip in 1979. And so there are some monster storms out there. Now, when they say that Hurricane Irma is the strongest storm in U.S. history, they really only have accurate records going back to 1979. That's when they started developing the storm flyers and so forth and so on. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Mark in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Michael. What's on my mind is X-class flares from the sun that were detected within the past 4 or 5 hours.
Yes.
Have you seen that report?
Oh, absolutely. They're saying this is the strongest such flare in the last 25 years. It's obviously going to be impacting electronics, shortwave listening. Might as well put the radio away for the next few days at least. But it is a very powerful event.
Not only put it away, but put it in a Faraday cage, because a magnitude 10 class X-flare is enough to do some frying, depending on what part of the Earth it happens to hit.
Well, anything that impacts the magnetosphere of the Earth only has an effect over long distances. So if you have a battery-operated radio or it's unplugged from the wall, you're going to be safe here in terms of the flare. And where the flares have the most damaging impact, of course, are on large distributed power systems with those long lines running across the face of the Earth, and they basically pick up that surge in the magnetic field. Now, ever since the Great New York blackout, engineers have been working to harden power distribution systems against flares. So mostly it's going to be certain satellite communications are going to be out. May have some trouble seeing your favorite movie on your satellite TV. But overall, these things tend to be survivable.
Okay, I thought it was going to be worse than that, but maybe you're right.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. We're talking about Hurricane Irma and the other storms that are going on out there. Miami-Dade County has started evacuations as of today, and they've broken the city into these various zones, and Zone A and B is already being asked to evacuate today and tomorrow, and then they'll see what the storm track is going to do. Like I said, the storm track looks to be shifting further east, which means by the time the storm gets there, the actual center of the storm, where the worst winds are, will be offshore. But it's still a huge monster storm, and it's going to impact a lot of people. I sure hope it doesn't hit that Kennedy Space Center. I don't know how much stress that vehicle assembly building is designed to take here. Meanwhile, the Navy is evacuating over 5,000 active duty contractors, families, and civilians from the Naval Air Station Key West. They have been ordered to leave, and they're saying basically 50 to 60 service members will stay behind to basically perform emergency functions, essential functions, make sure that they can call for help if something breaks there. But everybody else is being told to get on out. By the way, if you are in Florida and you are evacuating, you need to remember the Florida governor signed a bill allowing conceal carry during emergency evacuations. This was Senate Bill 290, was approved by an 86 to 26 vote on the Florida House, and basically it was a result of Hurricane Katrina, where many gun owners, when they were evacuating their homes, they took their guns with them, and the police basically brought them up on some charges, and they said, no, this is a situation in which you're justified taking your weapons with you for personal defense, self-defense, and so forth and so on. So if you are ordered to evacuate from your home, just remember that Senate bill in Florida, you're allowed to carry, conceal, and take your gun with you. Now, a lot of people are looking at Tropical Storm Jose. It is now predicted to become a hurricane in 36 hours. That one, the storm track is already veering north into the mid-Atlantic. It may threaten the Bermudas, or rather Bermuda, and those islands, but it's not going to hit the continental United States. Over in the western Gulf of Mexico, Tropical Storm Katia has grown very, very large, but its track is expected to just sort of sit there and wobble around a lot, so it too at this time does not appear to be presenting any kind of a threat to the mainland. The media, especially the liberal media, they're out there, they're trying to make fun of Donald Trump's assisting the aid efforts for Harvey. And Stephen Colbert on his show came on out saying that President Trump didn't meet a single storm victim, see an inch of rain, or get near a flooded street, and his audience promptly booed him, because we all know that's a lie. We've all seen the photos of Trump down there assisting, trying to help, signing all the requisite paperwork for federal disaster aid, and so forth and so on. Here's a little bit of an example of why safety decisions shouldn't be left up to money junkies, or for that matter politicians, because it turns out engineers for the Harris County Reservoir System predicted this flood risk 20 years ago. They laid out the inundation maps and said the city is not prepared for a major inundation, and that's certainly true here. Now, apparently that converted 747-400 has gotten past its paperwork hurdles. It is now actually there in service. They're flying it out to deal with some of these wildfires all over the Pacific Northwest, California. It is a monster, and the only reason they're not spending that much time on it is because of the impending hurricanes. But it is a major issue. But at least they've got this 747 out there that is able to be very effective against these fire lines. And again, as a caller chastised me yesterday, they've had a major typhoon called Typhoon Haikui, slammed into Shanghai and China's east coast. And apparently the winds are 90 miles per hour sustained, so it's not as powerful as Irma. And a lot of people are asking me, what's the difference between a hurricane and a typhoon? And the answer is there isn't really. It's just a convention. It used to be that these storms that formed in the Atlantic were called hurricanes, and the ones that formed in the Pacific were called typhoons. Well, the convention here in Hawaii is still to call them hurricanes, so now people are basically saying it's the other side of the international date line, it's a typhoon. But it's just it's a different name for the exact same phenomenon here. Now, let's get into the domestic politics here. There are some interesting developments here. Do you remember Hina Alvi? She's the wife of Imran Awan, and she succeeded in getting out of the country and fleeing the country. Apparently, she has now made a deal with prosecutors, and she is coming on back. She's going to face her charges, and apparently there's a plea bargain in effect, and she probably has a lot of information that might help the prosecution if there's a legitimate, serious prosecution. And right now, we're still seeing the government circle the wagons around that narcocracy, that dark, corrupted core of our government. Somebody found an interesting little article going all the way back to like 1996, and basically proves James Comey has always been protecting the Clintons. And so the article is basically from the Clinton term in the presidency, and it has to do with the Clinton clemency probe. And apparently the story is President Bill Clinton granted clemency to 4 swindlers, and it was suggested it might be political payback arranged by Hillary Rodham Clinton. And the probe was closed, no charges were filed, and guess who was in charge of that? U.S. Attorney James B. Comey. They just announced the investigation was over, no charges filed, did not give any reasons whatsoever. So Comey is definitely one of the enablers here. Now, over at CNN, they're still rocking and reeling from their loss of credibility, having to do with this story about the one of Trump's close associates and cozying up to Russia. And the story turned out to be fake. CNN had to retract it, which is a huge embarrassment. And basically, they fired some of their reporters on the team, and now the entire team has been told, don't go near Trump and Russia anymore, because your credibility in that area is blown. I think CNN is in serious, serious trouble. Now, the House Intelligence Committee has now subpoenaed the FBI and the Department of Justice for documents about that dodgy dossier that linked President Trump to Russia. You know, the one where it said President Trump and a couple of prostitutes were doing icky-poo things in the wedding suite at the Moscow Hotel. And it's a completely ginned-up document. It was written by this former MI6 agent who was working for a company that does opposition research, and when necessary creates bogus documents with which to smear candidates here. So now the House Intelligence Committee is talking to the FBI and the Department of Justice, and they issued a subpoena for the documents. The original subpoena had a deadline of September 1st. Neither the FBI nor the Department of Justice handed over any documents, so apparently the subpoena has now been extended to give them more time to deal with it. I don't think they're going to provide any papers of any use. Any documents they turn over won't have anything in them. That's probably why they're taking so long to answer the subpoena. They're going through the documents and looking for incriminating information. And a lot of people are starting to wonder, and this is over at zerohedge.com, intensifying Russia probes. Why? It's a proven fact Russia did not hack the DNC. And CNN is out there saying that the intensifying Russian probes could pit the Hill, Capitol Hill, against Robert Mueller. But I don't see how that would be a conflict, because Mueller, as far as we can tell, is fully on board with pursuing the Trump-Russia connection, and he's not interested in any exculpatory information. Doesn't want to hear any experts saying that the DNC emails had to be an internal leak. But in the end, there's only one angle in the Russia story that should be investigated. That's Hillary's role. The Uranium One deal, the Clinton Foundation, the CIA's role, and the FBI's role in the Russian blame game, which is exactly what it is. They're trying to turn Russia into our enemy to justify a whole new Cold War and generations of Americans whose tax money is taken away to make the military-industrial complex rich. Now, apparently, President Putin was at the BRICS summit in China, and basically he was asked if he was disappointed in Trump and in the deterioration of Moscow-Washington relations and this tit-for-tat diplomatic feud. And Putin dismissed the question as very naive and said, "Trump is not my bride, neither am I his bride or groom." So there we are. Meanwhile, Russia's UN envoy is out there saying Moscow's just become a very convenient scarecrow for the United States. I think the envoy probably meant a scapegoat, but scarecrow will do. They're going to wag it at you. Booga booga, the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming. Be afraid, be afraid. Meanwhile, for those of you with more of a taste toward the tabloid side of life, Senator Bob Menendez's, Senator Bob Menendez's corruption trial kicks off tomorrow, and it's going to have tales of international jet setting, $1,500 a night hotel rooms, and alleged affairs with models and actresses. So that's going to be very, very colorful. Now, the interesting thing is, if this gets a lot of media attention, it means there's someplace else they don't want us to look. Do you remember when they went on down to Panama and they grabbed Manuel Noriega, brought him back to the U.S., making license plates in someplace in Florida right now? Well, he had his day in court, and he was going to go on in, prepared to testify about how George Bush and the CIA were behind all this drug running, going from Central America into the U.S., but there wasn't a single reporter there, because right across the hall they had the trial for William Kennedy Smith. It was one of these spectacular rape trials, the Victoria's Secret defense. They had all the lacy undies there. That was where the sizzle was. And so they used one trial to keep the reporters from paying attention to one that had far more import. So if Menendez starts getting a lot of press coverage, be suspicious. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, as you know, in recent weeks, there's been this escalating diplomatic war between the United States and Russia. It actually began last year with the closure of some Russian diplomatic facilities, and some of their diplomats were asked to leave. More recently, Putin has decided to basically start playing that same game. They're asking U.S. diplomats to leave Russia. And now the U.S. is closing more Russian diplomatic facilities and having them searched. And as somebody pointed out, all of this violates the Vienna Convention. This is the international agreement that sets the rules for diplomacy around the world. This is what gives you the idea of diplomatic immunity for yourself, your person, the diplomatic pouches. And so once again, we're seeing the U.S. government simply ignoring past treaty obligations, and this is a reason why so many people just don't trust the U.S. government any longer. They won't accept their promises. They don't keep them. All right, let's get into the war zones now, and there are enough of them. Government forces take the upper hand in the battle for Deir ez-Zor. It's moving along very, very rapidly. ISIS tried to make an attempt to cut off the corridor between the city and the government-held area. That didn't work. They failed to take the corridor. So it's only a matter of time now before ISIS and Al-Qaeda have pretty much lost control of all the areas they were controlling. And along the way, the Syrian army, once again, has discovered U.S.-made TOW missiles in ISIL's convoy in eastern Hama. The Army stopped this convoy full of weapons, and they found U.S.-made anti-tank missiles, arms, and ammunition. And, of course, we know how it's getting in there. Remember, you had that article that came on out where it basically showed the U.S. was using diplomatic flights to bring weapons into Syria. And the reporter who wrote that got interrogated and harassed and all the usual stuff here. But there is a point to make here. This is from Russia Today. Bashar Assad's victory at Deir ez-Zor puts the spotlight on the illegal U.S. presence in Syria. Because remember, Russia is there at the express invitation of the Syrian government. The Syrian government has not invited the U.S. into their country, has not given them permission to operate inside the country. The U.S. presence in Syria is illegal. And now that the terrorists are pretty much all but finished, everybody's saying, why is the U.S. still there? If, in fact, they were there to get ISIS and al-Qaeda, which we know they weren't. They were actually backing them here. So I really do think the U.S. has failed in Syria, and this could derail the rest of that plan to conquer at least the Mideast resource-rich areas and shackle them to the U.S. dollar. Meanwhile, over in that portion of Iraq, which has been designated arbitrarily by the United States as the future Kurdistan, apparently representatives of the government that will be in place in the new Kurdistan are already talking with Russia as a strategic economic partner. So after all this war and all this brouhaha about carving chunks out of Iraq and Syria, the newly created Kurdistan is going to pivot away from the United States. And that's an epic foreign policy fail right there. Russia is still trying to play by the rule. They've drafted a UN Security Council resolution calling for the sending of peacekeepers to Ukraine to try and settle everything down between Poroshenko and the eastern Ukrainian republics. Of course, we know the United States will veto this. They won't need an excuse. I don't know what excuse they're going to have, but the U.S. is probably going to veto this one. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And, okay, waiting for the bump music to get on out there, and I don't know why the levels are as hot as they are, but they are. Okay, I want to take a step back here to the hurricanes going on. Apparently, JetBlue is selling $99 tickets for people trying to get away from Irma, which I think is a reasonable price. Apparently, some of the other airlines have already jacked their prices up to $1,000 for a ticket just to get out of the state of Florida. So, again, a lot of price gouging going on. Of course, I also understand there's only so many seats on those airplanes. And the caller who called in the other day may have had the right idea. If you have a recreational vehicle, get out using that. The real problem, of course, is these lots with all the mobile homes on them, because they're fastened to the ground. They have foundations, but hurricane can still cause a lot of damage there. All right, getting on back to the war zones. Over in Afghanistan, a suicide bomber has reportedly detonated explosives at Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. This is one of the areas where torture was being carried on out. And apparently this was provoked by a leaflet distributed by U.S. forces in the province of Parwan, which was highly offensive. And the senior U.S. commander in Afghanistan actually apologized and said, yes, it was very offensive, and we're sorry, but they still had the suicide bomber go on off. Now, as you know, Benjamin Netanyahu is under investigation for corruption, and it's about to get a little bit worse, because out in Hollywood, there's this guy, Arnon Milken, and he's a media mogul. He's a Hollywood producer. He was behind the 1990 hit film Pretty Women, He's done a lot of other interesting stuff as well. And he apparently has been running around openly claiming that he succeeded in bribing the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and so now Israeli authorities want to talk to him about that as well. You know, if you're going to bribe somebody, keep your mouth shut. So, let's get on over here to the situation in North Korea. They've been hammering that pretty hard right alongside the hurricane news all morning long on the corporate media, which may be significant. Remember, we're coming up on the 9th, which is the anniversary of the founding of Korea. And so I think if anything's going to happen, they'll do it on that date as part of the celebration. Meanwhile, commercial satellite images taken of North Korea's nuclear test site the day after that big explosion are showing a lot of landslides around that mountain. And a lot of people are very concerned whether that mountain is still strong enough to withstand more internal nuclear tests. And the Chinese are very upset. They're saying, we think the mountain has become unstable, and another major explosion deep down inside, the whole top of the mountain could come on off, and all the residual radiation from all 6 of the nuclear tests could come pouring on out, get on the wind and blow someplace where they would prefer it not go. Now, Putin has waded into the debate on North Korea, saying that as long as North Korea is afraid of a U.S. invasion, they're not going to give up their nuclear weapons. They'll eat grass before giving up their nuclear weapons because they are very much afraid. They remember what the U.S. did to this country, North Korea, at the start of the Korean War, and how huge loss of their population. And you've got the U.S., which in recent decades is clearly seen invading country after country after country after country after country. North Korea has a right to be concerned, and they also have a right to prepare a deterrent, which is what this is all about. It's a deterrent. But every time they fire off a test missile, the media makes a big deal about it. Oh, it proves how belligerent and provocative they are. Meanwhile, South Korea is carrying out missile tests. Nobody says anything about it. The U.S. is carrying out missile tests, including right here in Hawaii. Nobody says anything about it. It's just demonize, 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 until the American people are willing to go along with the invasion, supporting the war. I don't think they're getting the traction. I'm not hearing anybody that I talk to indicate their willingness to get involved in any more wars. I'm sure there are a few here on this island. But everybody here is very concerned that this is spinning out of control. And when you're talking about a war with a potential nuclear North Korea, a definitely nuclear China, a definitely nuclear Russia, people are very, very nervous. Most of the communications for the entire Pacific Fleet flow through those buildings down there at Pearl Harbor. And yes, they've got backup systems, alternate routing, the TACAMO aircraft. But a lot of people are very concerned. World War II effectively started right down in that harbor, out that window. Why couldn't World War III start here as well? Now, yesterday we were talking about how part of the preparation for a war is to demonize the people of the other country, demonize the country itself, and demonize the leaders. And, of course, we have been seeing nothing but nonstop descriptions of Kim Jong-un as a tyrant, a bully. He's insane. He's crazy. He's all these evil things. But you need to remember, Dennis Rodman has actually met the guy. And Rodman is saying Kim Jong-un likes to ride horses, likes to sing karaoke, likes a good joke. There are too many people in this country who still think the world is as it's described by the corporate media, and it very much isn't. Meanwhile, the belligerent talk is continuing. Admiral Scott Swift, the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, pledged on Tuesday to deploy an aircraft carrier strike group in waters off the Korean Peninsula. This is not going to calm things down. This is not going to calm things down at all. It's only going to further aggravate the problem. And I do wish that they would tone down the rhetoric just a little bit. Never one to pass up an economic opportunity, as everybody over in North Korea and South Korea and Japan are sneering at each other. The Trump administration is poised to authorize billions of dollars in military sales to U.S. allies in the Pacific in response to the growing nuclear standoff with North Korea, including possibly offering offensive weaponry to long pacifist Japan. Now, what they mean by that is when Japan came out of World War II and the U.S. occupation ended, they drew up a new constitution which expressly forbids wars of aggression. And that's why Japan's military is entirely based on defense. They don't have any long-range weapons. They're there to protect their own shores. Now, the Trump White House is saying it may be time to move past that and to allow Japan to have offensive weapons with which to strike North Korea if they so choose. By the way, an alert listener wrote on in, Manuel Noriega actually died last May. I was just making a joke about punching up the license plates and everything. Now, Korea's vice foreign minister, South Korea's vice foreign minister, Cho Hyun, basically came on out and said, war is not an option on the Korean peninsula. You will find some way to solve this diplomatically. Everybody's saying the same thing. Russia's saying it. China's saying it. And I noticed today on the news, they've pulled back a little bit, saying that Donald Trump is keeping the military option against North Korea open, but it's not his first choice. So they may be blinking there just a little bit. We have been talking about Russia's amazing electronic warfare capability, which they used on the USS Donald Cook up in the Black Sea, may have been one of the reasons why all those so many of those cruise missiles Donald Trump sent into Syria missed their targets. But apparently the United States Department of Transportation Maritime Administration is convinced they have seen the first documented use of a technique called GPS misdirection. This is a spoofing attack that affected apparently at least 20 ships, sending misleading signals to disrupt navigation and targeting. In other words, and our Navy has become very dependent on those satellites and on GPS. In fact, my understanding is they stopped teaching celestial navigation. Sextants are just coffee table items now. I'll bet they'll start going back on that as well, how to navigate by the stars. Now, if this is true, it is a formidable capability. It means the Russians can scatter our convoys, strip a carrier of its defensive screen. Good reason to not get into an argument with them, I think. All right, let's talk about the economic news. Over at the Federal Reserve, Vice Chairman Stanley Fischer has announced his decision to step down effective October 13th, which happens to be a Friday, citing personal reasons in his letter to Donald Trump. And Fisher's resignation increases the number of vacancies on the Fed board from 3 to 4, with Yellen and Brainard and Powell remaining the only members on that board. Now, this might accelerate Senate confirmation of Randall Quarles to be vice chair for supervision, which will be considered tomorrow by the Senate Banking Committee and looks likely to be approved. Congress now being back from recess, they're getting back to their business. But I'm wondering why this vice chair decided to resign. Maybe he just decided he was too old, or maybe he doesn't want to be there when it starts coming apart. Meanwhile, over at the BRICS alliance, they have added yet another member, Egypt. I don't know if they're going to go on calling it BRICS or try and come up with an acronym for all of the nations that are now members. But they're growing stronger. Countries want to be part of that. They don't trust the U.S. dollar anymore. Now again, at that annual BRICS summit in China, Putin came on out and said the goal right now is for a fair, multipolar world in which oil contracts could bypass the U.S. dollar and be traded with oil, yuan, and gold. See, when Richard Nixon ended gold convertibility, it led to a decline in demand for U.S. dollars by other countries, and that's when they cooked up the petrodollar deal. The U.S. government went to the government of all these Middle Eastern oil nations, and they said, we're going to make you a deal. You sell your oil only for the U.S. dollars and invest your money in the U.S., and we will guarantee your military safety. And that's why the global oil trade is always denominated in U.S. dollars. Saddam got permission to sell his oil for euros. A year later, the U.S. goes on in and kills him, bombs his country to rubble, and Iraq's oil is back on the world market only for the U.S. dollar. Same thing in Libya. Introduced the gold dinar, said that Libya's oil is for sale only for the gold dinar. They go on and kill Libya. That's what these wars are all about, keeping the world slave to the U.S. paper dollar and the petrodollar. And more countries are saying, no, we don't want this anymore. Because you use it to take advantage of us, you use it to control our country. They don't want to be part of the American empire anymore. All righty, let's see. Let's go to the telephones now. Ralph in California. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, just give you an update regarding the celestial navigation with the sextant.
Yep.
I talked to someone who was in the Marines, and they're bringing it back. They've been bringing it back because of that. They stopped in the 90s, like you were saying, because they were dependent on the electronic stuff.
Yes.
But then they started thinking about the MP attack, possible attack. So now they're teaching it. The Marines always taught it, but Navy brought it back. Just to give you an update.
Well, if you really know what you're doing, you can, and you've got a good chronometer, because you can't get your longitude without a chronometer. But if you really know what you're doing, you can find where you are on the planet, pretty easily with a sextant.
I agree. I bought one. I got a good deal on it, and I got some books on it, and slowly but surely I'm learning on it, just for my own sake and just having fun with it.
Yes.
I think it's kind of cool if you can know where you're at in the ocean with the sextant. I think it's pretty damn cool. So, anyways, I just wanted to give you an update on that.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. And there are still all the so-called clear channel radio stations, which also double as navigation aids. And they're required to have rubidium standard clocks to control their frequency, so it's bang where it ought to be. And when you're out at sea, you can null out on these clear channel stations and get your approximate location. If you have the necessary equipment, you can look at the phase relationship of the incoming signals and refine your position even more. But a good old-fashioned sextant, that's kind of nice to have. What's amazing about the Polynesian Voyaging Society, which is a group that has built a recreated Polynesian sailing craft, they've now gone all over the world using Polynesian sailing techniques. No sextant. Think about that. That's pretty amazing how they were able to do that. Because, look at the Pacific compared to the Atlantic and realize that thousands of years before Columbus made the trip across the pond, the Polynesians were maintaining regular commerce throughout all these islands. Getting on back to the economic news, a lot of people are starting to really scratch their heads over this Wells Fargo scandal. They've been caught with another 1.4 million fake accounts. Why, oh why, is nobody going to jail? And corporate law is designed to protect the corporate executives from losing their personal financial fortunes if the corporation goes out of business, which I guess is okay. But there is no law that says a corporate executive is immune from committing an illegal act and creating these fake accounts. That was fraud. And apparently Wells Fargo has also admitted that they enrolled more than 500,000 customer accounts into their online bill pay service without notifying them. Now, they've already agreed to pay out $910,000 to customers who accrued fees or charges related to these unknown accounts. Do you get it? Banking is crooked. Banking is a scam. I mean, look at all the stories coming out of Wall Street. Bernie Madoff, Wolf of Wall Street, the rest of it. They're crooks. That's how they get to be as rich as they are. We got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. And I'm having to adjust the audio on the board. We've got some issues out there. So let me just take a look at the volume here. All right, we're good to go. Let's go back to the phones. Ken in Fort Worth, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, howdy. You know, that cover-up Comey said he had about 17 more people to interview, and Hillary, that thing. Why don't the new guy pick up where he left off? I don't understand that.
Well, I made that point before. We have our second FBI director in a row who's refusing to go after Hillary. We have our second attorney general in a row who's refusing to go after Hillary. I'm telling you what's really going on here. It's not Hillary Clinton. It is the Clintons and the Bushes and the CIA and this narcocracy that runs back at least to the 1980s. And that is a big, huge, stinking, rotted core at the federal government, and that's what they're protecting. Because if that comes on out, they all have to get out there and find new jobs.
Somebody calls it the Clinton cartel, right?
It's been called that, or the Bush cartel, or some people call the CIA the cocaine importation agency.
Yeah, but I mean, I told my congressman to tell him to pick up or cover up Comey left off.
You could. I mean, Hillary Clinton never went to trial. She was never exonerated in a court of law, so double jeopardy does not apply. Those charges can still be brought. It's going to take somebody of courage to do it.
Right. Hey, nice talking to you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to James in Ireland. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I was actually phoning up to congratulate Hillary Clinton on offering all the profits from the sales of our new book to the hurricane victims in Texas. Oh, sorry, that was a dream. Oh, sorry. You know, those sleeping tablets, what can I say? Now, wouldn't that be a great way? We just got everybody to broadcast out that she's offering all the funds from a book to embarrass her into doing something and coming out.
Oh, all the funds from her new book. That must be what, $40, $50 by now?
Well, $125 for a seat that you don't get an autograph or a copy of the book in Canada, apparently.
Why do people still go to see her? I mean, they already have a slogan for it, Still with Hill. She's going to run again. If Donald Trump does not get her convicted of at least one felony, or if he doesn't clean up this elections mess, especially all the illegal votes, he's going to be a one-term president.
I don't know. Well, what I can tell you is, over here in Europe, everybody seems to love Trump.
Okay.
Which is, contrary to what we see on some of the news channels. Like, I know, I just sent you an email there in relation to Sky News here is reporting, the main headline news is that Facebook have come out now, they found evidence that Russia was paying for advertisements against Hillary Clinton on Facebook.
I did see that email. I had trouble understanding what it was saying, but I see that right now. All right, James, going to have to let you go. Got to do station identification. We'll be right back.
Lovely.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And apparently they're now updating Hurricane Irma from the National Hurricane Center. And they're basically just talking about its current track. They're not showing any updated predictions at this time here. Now then, getting on back to the economic news here. We've seen this happen in a lot of areas, but it's happening now in Kentucky. The state government is now talking about having to revise and revamp the state pension system because it's running out of money. This, in turn, has triggered a flood of public employees who are old enough applying for retirement because they want to get that pension payment to themselves locked in before the state government can institute any changes. And we've seen that everywhere else where they start talking about, we're going to have to change the pension system. It's out of money now. And why are they all out of money? Because back in 2007, 2008, Wall Street's pet rating agencies declared those mortgage-backed securities as AAA investments, which made it legal for pension funds to invest in them. And they did. And then that whole bubble collapsed, and the pensions were defunded. And nobody has the gonadal tissue to point the finger of blame at Wall Street and say, you made this pensions mess. Now, out here in Hawaii, which is a very liberal state, as you're all well aware, they're actually talking about a universal basic income, and it's welfare. They're going to put everybody on welfare. You are dependent on the government for the money coming on in. There you will be loyal. There's only one small problem. They have no idea how to pay for this. Passing out free money to everybody. That doesn't work. It can't work. Meanwhile, our governor has just signed a new bill regarding our light rail transit system. It's $2.5 billion in the hole, and years behind schedule. There have been major mishaps with it. And part of the bill that just got signed was something that a lot of people were demanding, a full audit of the contractors to see just where all that money went. Because this thing has just gone way over cost, way longer than it should. First part of the year, they had a little fair in the neighborhood, and the light rail people had a booth because they're out there trying to reach the public and convince everybody this is going to be a good idea. And I said, when are you going to be done on that stretch of road at the bottom of the hill where we live? Because right now it's torn on up, it's pothole city, and my car is already old enough without having to deal with that. And they said, oh, it'll be end of February, mid-March, we'll be out of there. Well, it's September. They're still down there. It is far from complete. One of the stations where you will get on and off the light rail is right there at the Pearl Ridge Shopping Mall. The shopping malls and tourism venues seem to have gotten all the stations. And they've got the little concrete wings reaching out on either side of the track where the station's going to go. The station isn't there. It's a mess. I would not at all be surprised if this project just fails and we just get to look at that concrete trackway in the sky from now on. Okay, story over at Market Watch. This is an op-ed piece here on how Bitcoin, Ether, and other cryptocurrencies may be seeing the beginning of the end. And the author goes on in and says, yes, a lot of people made a lot of money from cryptocurrencies, and they've managed to defy the doomsayers time and again. But now that you're seeing the Chinese crack down on these cryptocurrencies, they took a major hit. And what this article is saying, that yes, the cryptocurrencies are very dynamic, and yes, there's an opportunity to make money if you can buy low and sell high, but the risk factor is continuing to rise. Apparently, China is halting what are called initial coin offerings, which is the crypto bubble equivalent of the IPOs during the dot-com mania. If you had any kind of an idea, you could get an IPO without even having a product in the store. Now, we did have a caller on the show yesterday who was talking about the cotton crop over there in Texas, and it really is a tragedy because Texas has been dealing with drought for a lot of years, and then all of a sudden, nature seemed to be cooperating with them. And it was going to be a really good year for Texas farmers, and then Hurricane Harvey hit, and they're back to square one. It's not nice to fool Mother Nature. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. So let's talk about the DACA program, or the Delayed Action for Children Act. And Trump is ordering it shut down. Attorney General Jeff Sessions just made it official. There's going to be a 6-month delay so that Congress can get together and make this legal. Here's the point. The defenders of DACA as it is, and the illegal immigrants, the open borders people, are out there screaming about how Donald Trump is punishing the children and he's being racist and all the rest of it. No, what Donald Trump is trying to do is undo the fact that Barack Obama literally broke the law, because the president is not allowed to write an executive order that breaks existing United States law, which is what he did, Title VIII. You need Congress to go on in and say, we're going to have a new bill. And that's what Trump is saying. Congress needs to go back in and do the due diligence and craft a new immigration policy. And it has to be voted into law and signed by the president. It can't be done with an executive order. But we have all these media people out there just screaming about, oh, you're punishing the children. They've done nothing wrong, and it's cruel. Well, the parents did something wrong. And DACA only applied to, I think, 13 to 25-year-olds, which can be hardly considered to be children. Now, Cher is out there saying, house and protect the DACA dreamers in your homes. And she's out there tweeting all over to her people. And she's got a huge place out there in Malibu. I put a picture of it on the article on whatreallyhappened.com and asked how many of these people do you have in your home, Cher? And maybe somebody in her retinue was reading my site, because she came out with an updated version saying, yes, she's going to take in one of these children. Not exactly children. She's going to take one in to set the example here. Now, let's take a look at DACA itself, because everybody's lying about it, spinning it for their own particular agenda here. Now, if there is anybody at fault for what's going on, it is, in fact, the parents. Okay? Now, if your parents don't pay the rent and you're the child, you're still going to be evicted. If your parents take you into an amusement park, sneaking under the turnstiles, it's not the amusement park's fault when you get kicked on out. Now, blaming America or Trump or anyone else other than those parents who made that decision to violate U.S. law by stepping across that border is dishonest. Now, most of the DACA recipients are illegal immigrants. They're not supposed to be here. And you just have to keep saying again, this isn't racism, because illegal is not a race. What DACA is a massive amnesty program intending to allow some 800,000 people to stay in the country without any kind of penalty and make them citizens so that they can then vote here. Okay, I misspoke about the age. DACA is eligible only to those aged 15 to 32. So they aren't children. Now, the DACA recipients are taking jobs that Americans will do. That's the big deal out there. They're saying, oh, well, you know, these immigrants, they're going to take the jobs Americans are too proud to take. Well, when you've gotten close to 100 million Americans willing and able to work, who cannot find jobs for months and years, they're pretty much going to take anything they can get. But if there's already some immigrant in that job, then that job is not available to them. And I think that's what Donald Trump meant originally by putting America first. We have to take care of the American people first. We have to get our country squared away for the American people before we open those borders. Now, obviously, something nobody in the corporate media wants to talk about, some of these DACA recipients are in fact criminals. And apparently between 2013 and 2017, a total of 2,139 DACA recipients lost their amnesty benefits due to criminality or gang-affiliated concerns. Now remember, DACA is not a law. It is a violation of the law by executive order. This issue of allowing these children to remain in this country was never put before Congress. And people who are here illegally are supposed to be deported and repatriated into their own country. That's the law here in the United States of America. It's the law in every country in the world, including Mexico. You can't just go on down to Mexico, walk across the border, and get free stuff and go to work. They'll throw you in jail, or they'll send you back to the United States. Now, every time we see a DACA recipient in the media, they are portrayed as the next beneficiary of civilization. They're on the verge of curing cancer and poverty. No. Most of the DACA recipients are not overachievers. Nobody's really checking to see what they are in terms of their skill sets. Now, DACA is wildly unfair to Americans, most especially young Americans just trying to start out. These American kids followed the rules. The parents followed the rules. You young people, you are one of the 4 million Americans ready to enter the workforce every single year, but you have to compete against hundreds of thousands of line jumpers for those same entry-level jobs. And, of course, the surplus of labor depresses your wages. Now, DACA was already litigated and debated back in 2016. They've already heard the debate. Trump won. DACA actually encourages more illegal immigration. There are major financial incentives for these people to come here, and they're being held on out there as a lure to the refugees and the illegal immigrants. We need to discourage immigration. Eisenhower succeeded in doing it. Trump can do it. In most states, DACA recipients are eligible for welfare benefits. Once the DACA applicants are approved and get a temporary employment authorization card, they can apply for a Social Security number and basically go on out and get on welfare. And a lot of them are on welfare. We've seen the same thing all across Europe. The refugees coming on in, very few of them are integrating to that society. Very few of them are finding gainful employment. It's estimated that every refugee coming into Europe is going to take somewhere between 2 and 5 years before they find any kind of a job. Now, like most government entitlement programs, unless it is stopped, DACA will never stop growing. Because the people working for DACA, they want to hang on to their jobs. They'll go on out and look for people that they can bring into it. It's like the welfare system. You have welfare workers who understand if they don't find people to give the welfare money to, their own job could be eliminated. So they're out there looking for people to put on welfare. Remember last year, the FDA was actually advertising for people to go on food stamps. Apparently, on people who are coming across the border and applying for DACA, the application process ignores criminal behavior. And apparently, a lot of people who have come on in, these dreamers, who say, I want to go to school. And they get approved and they quit school. And there have been felonies found: Social Security fraud, forgery, perjury on I-9 forms, falsification of green cards, driver's licenses, identity theft. It's a bad idea. It's a very bad idea. Now, one of the other things that annoyed a lot of people is these programs to give scholarships to undocumented students. And basically, how is this fair? You have American students who legally are allowed to be here. They have to go into debt to get their education. But the people who are here illegally, the government is giving them money. How is that fair? Article out of Investment Watch blog. Apparently, there are now allegations from a Princeton University study that biases the SAT scores your children will take to go to college on the basis of their race. And it kind of makes a mockery of studying to get high grades if you're being penalized for being white when you take your SATs. Now, the actor James Wood, very high IQ, basically came on out and said all DACA really is, it's another Democratic vote scam system to get these people into the U.S. and have them vote Democratic. Vote themselves bread and circuses. We're going to go to the phones. Mark in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing? We're doing well here so far.
I'm doing okay.
I want to disagree with you on the DACA and the immigration because I am absolutely against slavery and one man begging another man for permission to sustain his life. And I disagree with giving people freebies and welfare and handouts. But I'm all against asking Hillary Clinton for permission to come to the United States or anybody else. Any man or woman that wants to come anywhere on the face of the earth, as long as they're not causing harm to anybody else, have a right to their life and their pursuits of happiness.
Well, we already had a system like that. It was called immigration. And people who were coming to the United States through the legal immigration process would be vetted for their skills, their educational background, basically checked for criminal activity, and they'd be given medical checks. And if they passed all of that, they would be welcomed into the United States of America. That's always been our policy, all the way back to Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty. The problem is these
all the way back to after the Civil, quote-unquote, war. Before that, no one had to have permission.
Well, this is the modern world. In the modern world, every single country controls its borders, except, unfortunately, for Soros targets, which are Europe and the United States. Mark, I need to put you on hold. We're going to take.
Well, I consider that slavery, but thank you.
All right, we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're still talking with Mark in Florida. And Mark, your last comment before we went to the break is kind of mystifying. It sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that you think the process of having to go through immigration to move into this country represents slavery?
I think being forced to ask any government official that none of them follow the Constitution for permission to sustain your life anywhere on earth, in this case the several states, is an act of asking your master for permission to be alive, and it's wrong.
Okay, do you think having to fill out the paperwork for a driver's license represents slavery?
Yes, unless you want to participate in traffic and commerce and work. I think every company, say Yellow Freight should license their drivers. The schools should license their bus drivers. Every company should be the licensor of their drivers, not the government.
Well, I think that puts an added cost of burden. Basically, you're just saying that going to the government to get a driver's license represents slavery, but going to your place of employment to get a driver's license is not?
No, because if you want to drive my car, you need my permission, and I should test you myself and make sure that you are safe.
Okay, but you're driving on the government's highways and roadways.
No, it belongs to the people.
but the government administers it to the people. Okay, you know, I have to be very honest. I think you're making a very, very silly argument. It's a very weak argument to push this idea that there should be open borders. And every nation on earth has a right to control who comes into their country and who doesn't, especially if that person is carrying a contagious disease, or if they are have a criminal background. That's just common sense here. Anyway, Mark, we're going to let you go. The phone lines we're going to let you go. Switch to Margie in California. Aloha, Margie. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello.
Hello.
I just want to say that the DACA people think that they have more rights than a U.S. citizen. I am an American of Mexican descent. I married an American of Mexican descent. We had 2 daughters. One graduated from Stanford and had to pay off a loan. My youngest daughter is still paying her loan of $45,000 from graduating from Long Beach State University. And they are ignoring the Hispanics that are here already, that are U.S. citizens. They're giving aid. These people can graduate from college and not pay anything back. How come we as U.S. citizens are having to pay back college?
Well, that's got a lot of people very, very angry. If we're going to spend money to educate people, we should be educating our own children rather than force our own children into permanent debt servitude to the banks while anybody who can sneak across the border gets a free education. I mean, it is an absolute mess.
Right.
But the liberals are desperate to flood this country with illegal immigrants because the illegal immigrants will vote for the Democrats because the Democrats will get more free stuff for the illegal immigrants. Remember how Rome fell. They discovered they could vote themselves bread and circuses until the system collapsed. And that's exactly what's going to happen here with all these refugees and illegal immigrants who think this is the land of milk and honey, and all they got to do is sit back and collect welfare and the rest of it and just have a real good lifestyle at the expense of those of us who work and produce.
That's right. That's right. And we're the ones that should be, that do vote, but you've got these people from DACA that also vote, and they counter our vote.
That's exactly right. They're trying to vote our country away from us. And that's why you have to be a U.S. citizen to vote, and that's why all these illegals who voted last year, that's an issue that has to be addressed. Because only citizens, only those people allowed to be here legally are allowed to vote. And when you have millions of illegal immigrant votes, you have basically an attempt to vote the nation away from us and vote it to themselves. It's bread and circuses. It brought down Rome. It's going to bring down the United States. Thank you for the phone call, Margie. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And just going on back and touching base, I'm looking at the latest predicted track for Hurricane Irma. It has stopped moving east, and right now the eye of the storm looks like it's going to be running along pretty much that east coast of Florida. That's going to be very, very rough. Apparently, Irma has now reached winds of 200 miles an hour, sustained at the core. That is still not a record. The record is still held by Hurricane Patricia, and that hit in, let's see, October of 2015. And it reached sustained winds of 215 miles an hour at the core. So Irma could get there. Irma could still get there. And again, if you're in Florida, got to be making those preparations here right now. Had a listener write on in talking about Mark in Florida and his comment saying, people not only have a right to choose where they want to live, but to choose who they want to live with. We're no more obligated to allow people through our borders to live among us than we're obligated to allow our neighbors through our front doors to live in our homes. While being excessively picky about immigrants is a bad thing, the opposite, allowing absolutely anyone in, is just as bad. Without being able to place some limits upon who lives among us, we actually lose our own freedom to the whims of chaos and anarchy. Very well put indeed. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Chris in the United Kingdom. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, my topic will be immigration.
Mm-hmm.
You're listening to your show, and I've been visiting the actual US for 20 years now. I just cannot believe the mindset of some of the people over there saying about open borders, this, that, and the other. The amount of Americans that I talk to, and they say, oh, Europe's wonderful, and freedom of movement, and the rest of it.
But that's only internal to the European Union.
Yeah.
Or it was.
Or I say to them, can't you see the mess that the open borders of all the immigrants that have come over from all the third world are making a mess of Europe? Just look at Sweden and Germany and France, of all the no-go areas, because that is going to happen to the US if you do not take care of the immigration. It's absolutely insane of some of the things that I hear from Americans and say, oh, let them in, do this, that, and the other. You cannot do that. You've got to have a firm immigration policy to weed out the undesirables. I mean, look at Sweden, of all the rapes and God knows what else over there. They have, in France, they've got 751 no-go areas. The Frenchmen can't even go into these areas. The police won't go into there. In Sweden, there's 61 no-go areas. The Swedish chief police officer that's not allowed on national TV, but he's doing it for the internet TV, he even states that they've lost control of big areas of Malmo in Sweden. Do the average American or Americans want that to happen in the US with these open borders? It's absolutely insanity. Europe is being wrecked, absolutely wrecked. And we know who's behind it, George Soros and all the rest of them. But we still got these idiots, even over here, saying, open the borders. And not only that, Sweden is now bankrupt. They have to go to the IMF to borrow money just to pay for the immigrants. How insane is that? Not alone about all the houses that are not available for our people, the actual hospitals that are overrun, especially in Germany with the 2 million that they've accepted, all the TB gone for the roofs, all of these exotic diseases they've got, and they don't even report that in the national press, because if you bring it up, you're automatically a racist. But it's costing Germany and us billions. And they say, oh, yeah, but let them all over and we're going to give them all jobs and they're all going to be part of the actual workforce. A very small percentage, because as you say, most of them are straight on welfare, have loads and loads of children, whatever. And if anybody says anything, you're a racist. It's insanity. I cannot believe it.
Well, you know, anytime somebody says that to me, that I'm being a racist, I say illegal isn't a race. It's a crime. Okay, we're talking about people who, by nature of the fact that they set foot across that border without official permission, they committed a crime. Okay, that's right. And that's what you need to understand. But everybody who's out there saying we have to have open borders and everybody has a right to go wherever they want, they're part of that globalist New World Order agenda. And Soros and his non-governmental organizations have been brainwashing kids in school. In fact, I got a story about that a little later in the talking points, to think about it's one globe, one planet, we need one government, and everybody should be able to blur together. No, we don't have an inherent right to go anywhere that we want. Try walking into the White House without permission and see what happens to you. Or, you know, walk into the inner parts of the Vatican without permission, or walk into the Kremlin without permission, see what happens to you. Barriers and boundaries are, unfortunately, an inevitable aspect of our society, our civilization, and that includes barriers and boundaries around the borders of our country.
And don't forget as well, you see, even the actual UN, the actual United Nations, 4 out of 5 of these refugees are not refugees, they're economic migrants. to come over to Europe and to the US and to get welfare. They've even stated that, 4 out of 5. And don't forget, you've got all the actual criminals that are coming over. And over here, because France and the UK is very liberal, too liberal, you've got people, these immigrants in some extreme cases, they've committed 300 crimes. They've never set a foot in prison or jail, yeah, and the actual liberals and the stupid liberal judges will not deport them.
I remember when that guy got, a judge dismissed a case against a refugee. He'd raped a woman. The judge said, well, I don't think he understands that that's a crime here. He should. When you're going to go live in another country, you learn their laws and you integrate to their society. Yeah. You don't flood their country with your own people and say, you all now have to be just like we are. It's a soft invasion. That's right. It's a soft invasion is what it is.
Yeah. And don't forget, in Germany, the Angela Merkel, which is a complete traitor to Germany, absolute complete traitor, she has got the press and told them, and the German police officers, who are now, a few of them have come out, and it says, do not report the rapes and the sexual assaults if they're immigrants. And they reckon, I think out of 20 rapes, I think 18 of them do not get reported. The actual Americans do not understand this, but in Germany, right, you've got massive protests, 100, 200,000 people protesting every couple of weeks, every month. But it's never reported on mainstream press. The Americans do not see this, but we do. The problems in Sweden, say France, Germany, where they set cars alight, demanding money, demanding everything, yeah? And if you don't give it to them, you're a racist. We have got horrendous trouble over here. But again, for me going over to the US, and I talk to people, this, that, and the other, and they're clueless. The majority of the Americans, which I've got many friends over there, by the way, are clueless. They do not know the problems that are going on over here. And they just say, oh, well, everything's wonderful. We like your socialized medicine. And I said, you really do not know what you're talking about. We are bankrupt because socialism. Our schools and everything else are a mess. We've got all this transgender rubbish coming in, as you just said, about all the kids are being brainwashed about, oh, you can't be racist, and you've got to give them that, and all the Christian religion is put on the back burner, and everything is for the immigrants. And all of our teachers, all of our universities are hardcore liberals, hard left.
Yes.
If you've got a difference of opinion over here, you're an outcast, you're a racist. And I, for one, and quite a few other people, are sick to death of it. And Americans, they better wake up fast.
I agree. I agree. We have to push back. Soros is going to spend, Soros and the people with him are pushing for the one world government. We have to push back and dig our heels in and say a single global government is a bad idea. It'll be the greatest tyranny in history, and because they won't be able to tolerate any kind of dissent. It will end social evolution. Because as we've seen even with the U.S. government, everybody works to maintain the status quo and keep things exactly as they are, unless they have an agenda they're pursuing. And with a single global government, we lose our choice. There won't be any point in going to any other country on earth because it'll all be under that same dictatorship.
Yeah. Why do people watch these CNN over here? I see that, and I want to throw a brick at the actual screen. It's just... the bias is just unbelievable. I mean, even your Fox News is biased, but I just see it, and I just cannot believe anybody would watch the TV in America, because it's garbage. It's 100% garbage.
Yeah, you're right. But
turn off the TV and go on your shows and other people's shows and get some real facts.
Yeah, or do a web search. Just say Refugee Problems Europe, and you'll get thousands and thousands of hits.
Yeah. We're in trouble. We're in big trouble.
Yes, we are. All right, Chris, well, thank you for that update, and I certainly agree with pretty much everything that you say. And again, you need to remember, unrestrained migration or immigration is a filtering system. You're not getting the best of the people from that source country, whether it's Syria or Mexico or wherever, because those people are happy where they are. They've got businesses, they've invested in houses, they've got friends. They're not going to go to another country. The instant you throw the borders open, what you're going to get are the people who couldn't make it in their own country, or they're fleeing prosecution, or they're carrying contagious diseases they hope the American hospitals will be able to cure them of. And so it's a filtering process. Probably most of these people coming across these borders are people that their home governments are just happy as all heck to get rid of. Remember when they opened up Florida to Cuban refugees? Castro went down to the prisons and put them all on boats and said, 90 miles that way. If I ever see you again, I'll shoot you. And following that, South Florida just descended into this incredible crime wave.
Trouble is that you see what you're getting, the worst of the worst, the criminals, the chancers, the rapists, the murderers, everything.
Yes.
And it's all being covered up. It's all being covered up. People don't know about it. And just to go back to prove my point, you've only got to look in Germany. Back in the 60s, they let in 2 million Turkish Muslims. Well, I think they're on their third generation now, and even then, 80% of those Turkish immigrants to Germany still do not work to this day. And Germany is just letting another 2 million. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming, but people just don't want to see it. They really don't.
Well, you know, calling somebody a racist, it's a very powerful tool to discourage discussion, the same way that Israelis shout Holocaust. You know, or that's it. It's a device to end the conversation because they really can't address the issues. Anyway, Chris, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much for the information.
All right.
And the phone lines are now open, 800-313-9443. Over in Italy, their prosecutor is getting ready to build a case against several of these NGOs, non-governmental organizations. Apparently, wiretaps have proven these NGOs are working with the human smugglers to flood Italy with refugees. This isn't just people who decide to go to Italy. This is an organized operation to stir all of the ethnic groups together into one common herd that are going to be easy to control because they have no idea who they are, where they came from, what their culture is. People who have no sense of identity, no sense of self, are easier to control. Meanwhile, Angela Merkel was out there in a rally in the university city of Heidelberg, Germany, and it's just days away before the German elections, and she got hit by a tomato. And the crowd was shouting, liar. The only way Angela Merkel is going to win this next election is with lots and lots of massive election fraud here. Now, a while back, somebody outed the organizer of that Charlottesville conservative white nationalist rally as being a former supporter of Obama and the Occupy movement. So the whole thing was a hoax and a setup. And now there's another one. Garen Archer was the protester on August 26th who screamed, "The Southern nation is a white nation." And apparently he, too, is actually a liberal. Apparently 2 weeks ago, he was visible in Democracy Now! Footage of the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. And apparently he had a baseball helmet and a shield, and he attacked one of the counter-protesters. Apparently at another rally in New Orleans, he was recorded screaming racial slurs at a black woman. This is all for show. All of this, it's a theater presentation to convince you there is a racial crisis in this country. And again, ignoring the terrible price that's been paid for it, the one good thing to come out of Hurricane Harvey is all these pictures of people helping each other with no regard whatsoever for the color of the skin, their gender, their orientation. You had black people helping white people. You had white people helping black people, because when faced with adversity, the American people come together as a single American people, and that's the way it ought to be. And that's why George Soros and these people are trying as hard as they can to split us apart, because that way we're going to be easier to control. So that whole narrative coming out of Antifa and Black Lives Matter about a racial crisis in America, it doesn't really exist. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, I mentioned this article earlier in the show, but this is where the schools are going. And this came out of the Daily Sheeple Report, and it's basically a letter written by an article written by a parent whose daughter is in 7th grade, and just after the start of the school year, which just happened, the daughter brought home a document which basically demands patriotic global citizen alliance from children. So they're trying to redefine patriotism away from love of one's nation and one's fellow countrymen into being loyal to this global citizen alliance. And the article goes on to a lot of detail about how it sounds like it's a badly written science fiction novel leading to a dystopian society. But the parent was very, very angry, and apparently is already doing some interviews. And then they end with a thought that I think really says it right on the line. This document is out there telling children they must respect all people and all beliefs. Okay? Well, do we want our children to respect the belief system of a Pol Pot who murdered more than half the citizens of Cambodia? No, we don't. Do we want our children to respect the beliefs of, for example, the Nazis? Now, it's okay for the kids to think about the rest of the world and certainly have an appreciation for these other cultures. But being a patriot means being loyal to your country and your countrymen at all times, and to the government when it deserves it. But we've seen throughout Common Core, they're trying to rewrite the founding documents of this nation. They're trying to change the history. If you look at all they're doing with not just the Confederacy, but now they want to go after Christopher Columbus. And everybody is spinning his history to basically serve their own ends, that Christopher Columbus found the New World, and that's why it was declared to be part of the White Empire. No, it wasn't. After Christopher Columbus found the New World, it was only Europeans who decided they were going to take the risk and spend the money to go there. And that's really what happened. So, again, the brainwashing is going on in the school. And apparently over at East Sussex School, there's another little upset in that they want all the school uniforms now to be gender neutral. In other words, the boys and girls are going to wear exactly the same uniform. Skirts are banned. The girls are going to have to wear pants, which I don't have a problem with if that's what they want to do. But apparently the parents are out there saying that, you know, our kids do have genders. And it should be okay for us to have uniforms that respect that, the fact that they have a gender. Meanwhile, the PC people are out there at it again. The Washington National Cathedral is going to remove all of the stained glass windows honoring Confederate generals. The Charlottesville City Council votes to remove the Stonewall Jackson statue. We'll be right back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And before we move on, I want to read you a quote. This is from George Orwell's 1984, and if you have not read that book, you need to. And there is this quote, and it's the character of Winston Smith talking third-person narration. Here's the quote. Every record has been destroyed or falsified. Every book rewritten. Every picture has been repainted. Every statue and street building has been renamed. Every date has been altered. And the process is continuing day by day and minute by minute. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. The internet was supposed to spark an information revolution where we had access to information. The government is now trying to put the blinders back on one way or the other, to cut us off from the information, or to poison the well with all these nonsensical stories about how weather modification caused these hurricanes and directed them to specific parts of the country, which doesn't really make a lot of sense why they would do that. But again, along with chemtrails and fake Apollo moon landings, it's just part of the propaganda to try and keep people confused so they can't work out what's really going on. And that's why it's really important that you not just sit in front of a TV screen and assume it's telling you what's really going on, because that's not its job. The job of the corporate media is to sell you things. A new car, a new cologne, a new policy, a new president, a new war. That's what they are trying to do. All right, let's take a phone call. Sherry in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, this is kind of a gruesome thought. It just popped into my mind. If the object of globalism is to create one super communistic type workforce totally under corporate control and everything, like a super communism, maybe it'd be cheaper and more expedient if these corporations didn't want people to have genders because they, maybe they don't want them to have genders because they don't want them to reproduce.
Well,
you know, it would just, they die and then you bring the new ones.
Well, if you look, there's a lot of science fiction writers have postulated a society in which reproduction through the good old-fashioned way is forbidden, and the new babies are manufactured genetically in a laboratory like Monsanto. I think Aldous Huxley's Brave New World had that as well. But the attack on our gender identity, the attack on our gender identity is part of trying to trick us into questioning who we are. Are we really sure? And that's where all this gender is fluid. You know, you don't really know whether you're male or female or somewhere in between. And they're really confusing the heck out of a lot of kids who are too young to really be dealing with these issues anyway. And I have to wonder just what percentage of people who think that there's some kind of gender mix-up is something that they've been sold rather than something that they've arrived at themselves. Now, the gay people that I know knew that they were gay early on. It wasn't really a big mystery to them. But the globalists want us so confused that we're not even really sure which restroom we should be using. By the way, we were hearing earlier, there is a women's only surfing competition that's getting ready to take place up on the North Shore. And the first thing I said is there's going to be some well-muscled dude show up and say, I identify as a woman, you have to let me enter.
Yeah. What about the sterilization through drugs and things that we may not be fully aware of that's going on, like you were talking about the corn?
Yeah, it has been going on here and there, mostly in the third world, and that all goes back to National Security Study 200, written by Henry...
That could be further... Go on.
Well, yeah, we're talking about back in the Nixon years, and the technology can certainly have been moving forward. Bill Gates openly says vaccines should be used to halt human reproduction. The thing is, with the epicide corn, if it's already broken into the wild, then we're looking potentially at an extinction-level event. And I know you're always hearing from all these genetics laboratories that they successfully cloned this and they successfully closed that. The reality is most of those attempts to clone a mammal have wound up being epic disasters. The artificially created life forms, they get a good picture of them for the media, and after that they begin to have some serious problems. It's not a perfect technology. It's not even close yet.
Yeah, and I can't, I mean, I know this isn't stuff of the show, but I can't kind of keep my mind away from the idea of ETs too. Being in this same category of the sterilized beings
I'm
that
sorry.
can't transcend.
Who are we talking about now?
Well, I guess it's all part of the same package. I won't go too far out of the simple fact that they might want a workforce that can't reproduce. I'll just leave it at that because I think they see some kind of utopia for themselves. I'm not talking about corporations.
Okay, so you're saying the corporations want a workforce that can't reproduce. Well, as long as humans are still, the cheaper than robots, and that still is the case, that may be true. But again, this idea of a super utopia was something that was covered by Tom Clancy in his last solely written book, Rainbow Six, and it was about all these ultra-rich people who wanted the Earth to go back to nature, except for, of course, their palatial estates, and they were going to start an Ebola pandemic across the globe. So we know that idea is definitely out there. But if you have a workforce that can't reproduce, generally, as a rule of thumb, you find adults tend to work a lot harder if they know there's a child at home that they are taking care of.
I guess, yeah, but cloning doesn't last long. I mean, you go quicker. So that would be expedient as far as not having an old workforce,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. This is science fiction.
Yes.
But it just occurred to me, and I'm not surprised that it has occurred to a lot of other people that know more about science fiction than I do. It just seems like they're working towards that end, and this thing, I can't make any sense of the gender thing other than this, why they would want to meld us all together. Gosh, I mean, except that's their workforce.
Unless they physically sterilize us, then human beings, regardless of what gender they think they are, sooner or later their instincts are going to get them to hump each other, and one of the two is going to become pregnant. And if they do go ahead and sterilize us all, then they don't really need to worry about our gender identity, do they?
No, that's true. Okay. All right.
All right. Sherry, we're going to let you go here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All righty. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network. Boy, oh boy, these stories are just getting out of control. Apparently, over in Ohio, I'm not sure exactly where this took place, but this is reported in Oraz.com. A newspaper photographer from Ohio was shot Monday night by a sheriff's deputy who apparently mistook the camera and tripod for a gun, and he fired without any warning whatsoever. Now, that's a problem for me because I'm really big into photography. Actually, that got me into trouble. One time when I was working on Lost, I was sent up to take some plates, hold plates, from the top of the parking structure at the Dole Cannery. Homeland Security showed up. It's amazing here. Now, as you know, Apple is getting ready to debut the iPhone 8. And analysts are saying this is likely to be a flop. This is in the Daily Mail over in Great Britain. Analysts are saying that polls indicate only 16% of users will upgrade to the new handset. And probably most of those are people who are back on the iPhone 5 or the iPhone 6. I think people on the iPhone 7 aren't going to want to really spend the money. They don't have it to spend. Now, Facebook has been caught once again fudging their numbers. Facebook claims that its ads can reach more people in the United States than the number of people who live in the United States, according to the Census Bureau. So, over at Pivotal Research, their analyst Brian Weiser picked up on the discrepancy by checking potential audience estimates provided by Facebook's self-serve ad buying tool. Apparently, you can't even talk to a person at Facebook. You have to go through a web interface. So basically, Facebook estimates its ad running on Facebook, Instagram, and its audience network, ad network, can reach 10 million more 18 to 24-year-olds and 15 million more 25 to 34-year-olds in the U.S. than actually live in the U.S. And that's assuming that the number of people in those groups are actually using Facebook on a regular basis. There are people who are not on the computers yet. There are people who never go to Facebook. And so they're inflating their ad numbers. They're cheating their advertisers. But by golly, they're going to make sure you don't post anything controversial here. And apparently at this point, according to another article, this is out of Investment Watch blog, apparently Facebook's censorship system is now labeling political articles as hate speech. It's just an automatic thing. Oh, it's politics, it must be hate speech. Now let's get into human-caused global warming. And I want to back up here to this article that showed up in Patriot Rising about how George Soros gave former Vice President Al Gore's environmental group millions of dollars over 3 years to create, quote, a political space for aggressive U.S. action, end quote, on global warming. So this is coming from George Soros. And you need to remember that the foundation for the one world government rests on 3 pillars. One is human-caused global warming, requiring the surrendering of your sovereignty to a global environmental authority. Then there was a global pandemic, which would require surrendering your sovereignty to a global health authority. They tried that in 2009 with the when pigs fly flu, and it didn't work. And, of course, the third pillar is one that very much seems to be moving forward right now, and that is a global economic crash requiring surrendering of your sovereignty to a single global private central bank. So Soros is pushing on all of these things. Meanwhile, do you remember every time we talk about studies saying the ocean is warming, blah, 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 and my first question is, how many active volcanoes and thermal vents are there on the floors of the world's oceans? And then you get that puzzled look and you say, it's a trick question. Nobody really knows. Nobody really knows. And until you can subtract out the heat contribution from the geothermal features on the floor of the ocean, then any attempt to claim that humans are warming the ocean by thus and such is just scientific, wild-ass guessing. Now, according to an article published today in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America, a study by Desert Research Institute Professor Joseph R. McConnell and his colleagues documented a 192-year series of massive volcanic eruptions in Antarctica that coincide with accelerated deglaciation about 17,700 years ago. In other words, the simple version, there are massive numbers of volcanoes on the ocean floor around Antarctica. They are capable of changing the climate. And it's another reminder, nobody really knows what's down there. Nobody knows what's down there. And you have to know, or your model is incomplete. Of course, we know from the ClimateGate scandal, the computer models being developed at the Hadley Climate Research Unit were rigged. The source code was leaked out along with all the emails about how they're going to hide the decline. And you could see it right there in the source code. They literally hard-coded in that hockey stick. And it's not in the real data. And every time you will get the adjusted climate data from NASA or NOAA or CRU or any of these other people, yes, there's that hockey stick at the end. Then if you get your hands on the raw data, it's not there. And you say, what's going on? And they say, well, we had to do a statistical correction. Really? On what basis? And you'll get a long, sob story about how instrument changing and reciting and blah, 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 blah. No, they're faking the data to push an agenda. Because they want your money. They want your obedience. They want you afraid that everything you do is hastening the end of planet Earth. It's a hoax. One of many played on the people of planet Earth by their various rulers. Now, former Senator John Edwards is now in court representing cancer-stricken Navy service members who were exposed to radiation during the humanitarian mission to Fukushima. And Edwards is asking the judge to set a date for trial because some of the sailors have already passed away and the others are getting close from the cancers and leukemias. All right, let's take some phone calls. Mark in Georgia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha to you, too. Speaking of the androgenic global warming hoax, there's a webinar hosted by D. Edward Griffin et al., and I'm driving right now, so it's not a very good idea, but I think we're in day 3 of a 5-day webinar that's free, and when I get a chance, I'll shoot it to you on... You're on Facebook, or you're I know that somebody... Maybe it's Corvette that he doesn't go on Facebook for reasons, but I think I have seen you on Facebook, right?
I have a Facebook account. I'm not using it very much these days because of the censorship issues. But, you know, if you go to the top of my website, there's a little link that will send an email to me.
Okay. Well, right now it's not a good idea to do this kind of stuff while driving, but as soon as I get to where I'm going, we're in day 3 of 5, and I believe they'll probably do something because they're probably none of the presenters are being compensated. They're all doing it pro bono, which is one of the major arguments that I've heard. Is like, well, if you're going to make that argument, how about look at all the funding that's been given on one side of this AEW hoax, and we're on the same page about that because I'm looking at the evidence, and the only people I'm hearing addressing the relative amount of androgenic versus geogenic carbon emissions are the skeptics. The people who are advocating this is this big thing, and it's like, yeah, but what about, I think it was Penn and Teller did this thing, BS, won't go any further with that, but they were talking about where they got a petition going to ban dihydromonoxide because it contributed to global warming, which is just another expression for water. You know, you try to ban water, good luck. What do you call it, dihydromonoxide? People who don't know better.
Oh, they're not going to ban it. They're going to tax it.
Yeah, well, I think that Beatles song said it well. At 19, if 19 for you and 1 for you and 19 for me, and
the tax man.
5%'s too small. Yeah, just be glad we don't take it all, right? And yeah, you're probably right. They would tax water, and if they could get to the degree they could get away with it. So I'll be shooting you the link as soon as I get a chance, okay?
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to let you go. Thank you for the call. Lord Moncton has a new presentation out. It's a little over an hour, and again, he's going on out after that. Meanwhile, of course, the promoters of human-caused global warming are running around screaming, the hurricanes prove the world is warming, the hurricanes prove the world is warming. No, they don't. As we explained yesterday, storms are caused by a temperature differential, and you can get monster storms like Irma as easily with upper atmosphere cooling as with warming the surface. And again, look at the outer gas giant planets in our solar system. Hundreds of degrees below zero and storms the size of our entire world. Okay, we're going to take a break for commercials. We got another caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're still tracking Hurricane Irma heading into Florida, Miami-Dade, that whole area. Gee, I certainly hope all those 100-year-old and older Hillary voters don't get washed away. All right, we're going to go back to the phone. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, just to add to what your last caller spoke about, the global warming hoax, the webinar, I sent you that link, I think, on Monday. So it was going from September 4th to the 8th, I believe. So I sent you that link on your email, so check that. If you don't do Facebook, I know I sent that to you and John and a couple other people if they were interested in watching that webinar. So check your email. But what I wanted to talk to you about was on September 1st, I did catch Liberty News, and they were talking about some new insanity with the children, and evidently they want to eliminate the USC mascot, the Trojan, soldier because it represented white supremacy. I just couldn't believe how far these guys are reaching to these extremes of everything is bad. It's all white supremacy and racist. But the Trojan mascot for USC will probably disappear.
That's pretty silly. But again, they're trying to erase our history so that starting with the next generation or after that, people will grow up with no idea who they are or what their family history is or what their history is in order to make them easy to control.
That's it, Michael, for me. Have a great day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open now. And let's see. Getting on to the science and health issues here. Story coming out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain. Plastic is in more than 80% of tap water around the world. And apparently it is a very fine plastic which can actually penetrate organs. Boy, oh boy, every day it seems like there's something else coming out of your faucets. And you have to wonder, how does it get in there? Are they not using filters on these? Well, you should certainly be using a filter on your water here. But according to this article, more than 80% of the world's tap water is contaminated with plastic. Guess who has the highest contamination rate? The United States of America. 93%. Followed by Lebanon and India. France, Germany, and Great Britain have the lowest levels at 72%. So there we are. The water. You need water. You got to have water. If we're supposed to have a right to life, that includes a right to all those things that life depends on, like safe, healthy food and safe drinking water, and we don't have it. Now, there is a peer-reviewed article that just now came on out. We linked to it. It's a journal of the European Medicines Agency. And it's a peer-reviewed scientific article. It's very dry to read. The title of it is Infanrix, Hexa, and Sudden Death, a review of the periodic safety update report submitted to the European Medicines Agency. And what it says in a nutshell is that the researchers found there is a very strong correlation with sudden infant death occurring immediately following a multiple vaccination. But of course, this is being hidden in order to keep the profits of the pharmaceutical companies high. And innocent parents are sent to jail for killing their own kids with shaken baby syndrome. Okay, moving on here. Now, I've talked about the drug ecstasy before. And interestingly enough, there's been a large call for legalizing its use in psychotherapy because it has this wonderful ability where you can look at yourself without fear or guilt or any of that other stuff that blocks what's going on. And it really is very, very positive. It can cut the amount of time you need to be in therapy, by 4/5. And the FDA has finally granted breakthrough status to ecstasy for post-traumatic stress disorder, while at the same time prohibiting marijuana. Because you got to buy the pills from the drugstore. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Rather interesting development. The scientist in charge of the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory has stepped down and is basically leaving the park. This is Jake Lowenstern, and he was there for 15 years. Basically he's leaving to lead the Volcano Disaster Assistance Program, where he will work to assist volcano observations in developing countries that face daunting volcanic risk, of which there are a lot. And maybe it was just a better opportunity for him. On the other hand, I remember when I was living in Los Angeles, and Dr. Richter, the earthquake expert, moved his family out of the state. Anyway. As we mentioned earlier when I was talking with that gentleman, or rather the caller on the phone, the sun this morning emitted a very powerful X-class solar flare, the most powerful in a decade, and it is causing communications difficulty. The ionosphere is going to be riled up. I wouldn't bother getting out to shortwave later on tonight. But it is very intense out there, and there may be some interruptions to communication satellites. Now, apparently, there's an interesting story. This is over in RIMF.com. And apparently, this father took his two daughters up to this place called Dawsbury Pool in Cornwall, England, which, according to legend, is where King Arthur acquired Excalibur and to which it was later returned. And so one of the daughters, he's telling them the story about the legend of King Arthur, because tradition says this is where the sword wound up. And she's swimming around, and all of a sudden she feels something hard in the mud, and she pulls it up and finds herself handling a 4-foot-long steel sword. And of course it was like, wow, it really was here. But the sword is only about 20 or 30 years old, and it's probably an old film prop, because quite a few movies about the Arthurian legend have made a point of filming there as well, including the film Excalibur. All right, let's take another phone call here. Kit in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. This is a subject that you've wondered about on several shows, so even though it's off topic today, I thought I'd touch on it. It's regarding the high cost of medical costs, whether it's doctors and medical care or prescription or medical equipment, hospitalization. It's all sky high here in the United States. And the reason for that is because every other country in the world is a socialist-based medical system. And so they negotiate the prices for all of those items with the suppliers in advance, and then the prices are locked in. And because the prices are negotiated low, then they only have one place left in the world where they can go to recover their research and development costs and even make a profit, and that's the United States, because the United States is not a socialist-based medical system just yet.
Well, it isn't, but it's actually a little more complicated than that, because you need to remember, again, this all goes back to Richard Nixon. Prior to his term in the White House, medical care was considered a service in this country, and there were limits on how much money they could make off patients. There were requirements that emergency rooms treat people even if there was no proof of ability to pay. And Richard Nixon signed the Health Maintenance Organization Act, which began the HMOs, and he did it for his good buddy who was head of Kaiser Permanente, which was Kaiser Aluminum's in-house medical care system. And that's really the moment where medical care stopped being about taking care of patients and became just another money-making opportunity. And everybody is price gouging and charging huge amounts of money. The paperwork overhead added by Obamacare has resulted in there being a dramatic increase in the number of staffers hospitals have to have on hand to process all that paperwork.
Yes.
And again, everybody sees themselves as wanting to get rich. Then you have the fact that the medical care isn't all that good, which results in increased malpractice lawsuits, which in turn results in an increase in the malpractice insurance premiums to those doctors and hospitals. So it's a self-feeding cycle, and it really is out of control.
Yes, insanity. Okay, Mike, that's all I had. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch to Mike in Maryland. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I'd like to read this one quote from 1984 and then mention a couple of movies. that I think deal with predictive programming. But let me read this one quote.
Okay.
It's from OrwellToday.com. And it's got quotes from the book that you could reference, different topics. So here's the quote. Already we are breaking down the habits of thought which have survived from birth before the revolution. We have to cut the links between child and parent, and between man, and between man and woman. No one dares trust a wife or a child or a friend any longer. But in the future, there will be no wives and no friends. Children will be taken from their parents at birth, as one takes eggs from a hen. The sex instinct will be eradicated. Procreation will be an animal formality, like the renewal of a ration card. And I'm sure you're probably familiar with the recent movie Children of Men,
yes,
where virtually all the birth rate has gone to virtually zero. It came out a few years ago.
Yes.
And then there's a movie you may not be familiar with. It was on YouTube. It was called the ZPG, which stands for Zero Population Growth.
Yes. Came
out like in 1972 or 73.
I remember that.
And it had some pretty famous actors in it. We used to be able to watch the whole movie on YouTube, but apparently it was scrubbed. But basically, it's a futuristic dystopic era where people are no longer able, unless you're like, one of the elites, to have children, and instead what they have is a animatronic baby that people can have in their house to substitute for a real baby. It's like really, really sick.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And and then if you look at the Georgia Guidestones, where they want to bring the population down to a manageable 500 million, and all the elites from the King of England to, you name it, talk about eradicating the majority of the population, you can see where this is headed.
Well, there are always okay. I mean, there is an issue with because of modern medicine and the advance of technology, humans no longer live in the predator-filled environment in which we evolved, and so there's going to be a population problem because sex is a lot more fun than dying, and I recognize that. The problem I have with all these people who want to mandate population control is they always want somebody else to die or to go without having children, not themselves. If you look again back at Kissinger's National Security Study 200, it was targeted on that third world, targeting people who lived over natural resources U.S. corporations coveted. And so they would send in these various groups to offer free vaccinations to the people there who didn't realize that these vaccines were also sterilizing them.
Well, what they do is, I think they target third world populations first, experiment on them to see what works, and then eventually it winds up being implemented in the first world. That's my opinion.
It's entirely possible, but again, I acknowledge there's a population problem, but again, everybody I know who's out there, pushing for population control, it's not for them, it's for everybody else. It's like... of
course, it's total hypocrisy.
Yeah, it's like when Al Gore gets out there and screams about human-caused global warming, and he jets around the world in his charter jet, and he's got a big, huge house that's got something like 30 times the carbon footprint of the average American home.
Oh, yeah, it's all a big fallacy. It's all a big scam.
Yeah, well, it is, and... again, I have a theory. I haven't done the research to confirm it. I think that when the human population gets to a certain density, we have a built-in population reduction mechanism, and it's called homosexuality. Because looking throughout history, you will see the per capita occurrence of homosexuality occurring when the entire population is under great stress, overcrowding, famine, war. And we certainly know that certain other life forms on Earth can change their sexuality, change which gender they really are. That's mostly in the amphibians. But I really do think that we do have a self-limiting population control mechanism. and maybe we ought to just sort of let it do what it's going to do, and stop mucking about with DNA, because again, going back to that epizite corn, if that has broken into the wild, it's only a matter of time until all corn on Earth is tainted with this gene, and then you're talking an extinction level event.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why the New World Order promotes homosexuality too, to limit the population growth as well. But thanks for taking my call, and you have a good day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch to Ernest in Nevada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, me?
Yes, you.
Yeah, Mike, I know you don't like to bring in subjects such as weather, weaponry, chemtrails, things like that, HAARP. And but I just like to, I have a point that I'm trying to make, and that, for one thing, these things are possible, and they may not be probable, but they are possible, and you have to investigate them before you can dismiss them. I think that would be the way to go. Are you familiar with the former Defense Secretary William Cohen?
Vaguely, yes.
In April 1997, he had made a speech regarding that. And some of these quotes were like, others are engaging in an equal type of terrorism, whereby they can alter the climate, set off earthquakes, volcanoes remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves.
Yeah, and then down at the bottom, down at the bottom, he asks for a budget increase.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it doesn't mean it's not true. It's just
look, anytime anybody is going back to the government or the dean's office or whatever to ask for more money than they got last year, they're gonna sell it with some kind of scare story in order to get the money. I mean, if he walks on in there and says nothing's going on, will you give me a budget increase? He's going to get a no.
Well, I mean, there are also quotes from the listed of the United Nations Treaty that earthquakes, tsunamis, an upset in the ecological balance of a region, changes in weather patterns, clouds, precipitation, cyclones, and tornadic storms. All these things are documented, not just William Cohen, but this is actually something that's been contended. UN,
that's just common sense. Ernest, that's just common sense that anytime there's any kind of a natural event, it's going to have an impact on the region. Making a leap from there to saying that these hurricanes and earthquakes are being created, there's no provenance on that one at all. Anyway, we're going to let you go here. We're coming up on a commercial break. We're coming up on a commercial break, and we're going to get some news in before then. Apparently over in Arizona, the Arizona Air National Guard lost an F-16 based out of the 162nd Wing, and it crashed in southeast Arizona. Apparently was being flown by an Iraqi pilot who unfortunately was unable to eject, and as a result, he has died. So they're still looking into what's going on there. Just as a reminder today, John Stadmiller is going to have Catherine Austin Fitz for 2 hours today, so you're going to want to stay tuned to his program as soon as we are done here. Now, here's an article that came on out, Daily Mail again, breakthrough in hunt for life on Mars as boron find adds to evidence life did once exist on the red planet. And they're talking about how Curiosity has detected borates, which are a chemical that plays an important role in making both RNA and DNA. And the fact that they're finding this chemical basically supports the idea that they are finding evidence of life on Mars. And I'm really very frustrated because we did find life on Mars in 1976. And for political reasons, it was kind of basically ignored. And there are all these articles, we linked to a bunch of them at whatreallyhappened.com, all these articles from peer-reviewed studies, journals, and so forth, and an interesting theory has arisen, and it has to do with the way that the labeled release experiment worked, because the way it worked is they took the Martian soil, they put it into this nutrient solution, and the nutrient solution was tagged with a radioactive carbon, so as the life ingested the nutrients and belched, the detector would pick it up. And we got a positive response on that. And then over time, the response died on out, and that was the basis for NASA to say, well, we don't know what happened, but the fact that it died on out tells us it wasn't life, because it would have reproduced and split and go on, so forth and so on. Now, a gentleman by the name of Holt Cooper has come up with a very interesting and very plausible reason why this did not work. And it has to do with the fact that the mixing solution for the nutrients was pure water. And that's not what they have on Mars. They have water that apparently is mixed with heavy doses of salt so it won't freeze. And so basically they were feeding the organisms the wrong kind of water and actually killed the microbes in the process of looking for them. This makes a lot of sense. We're going to be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, back in 2013, there was a super bolide meteor that came down over the Russian city of Chelyabinsk. And by the way, there's apparently a new TV series out called Salvation. And the storyline there is that the U.S. had a secret project to steer the asteroid as a form of covert attack on Russia, which I thought was really pushing it. But it came on down. It was brighter than the sun. It left a shock wave behind it that damaged buildings, broke windows all over the place. Definitely one of the biggest. Now, here is the interesting part. We know that NASA and various universities have set up these projects to map the near-Earth objects, to be able to sound a warning well enough in advance where we can go on up with a tow truck and move the asteroid so it won't come down on something important like our planet. Long way away from being able to do that. Here's the point. They completely missed this one coming on in. No, it came in from apparently an angle where nobody was looking, and it came on in. And it's good that it exploded up in the air. If it had hit the ground, the damage would have been worse. Well, apparently they had another one 2 days ago over Canada, from the city of Nelson in British Columbia to Calgary in Alberta, about 10 p.m. on, I think it was Alberta time. And it was an exploding fireball, another super bolide. It changed night into day, rattled windows all over the place here. And nobody saw that one coming either. So it might be time to reevaluate the methodology, because obviously rocks of this size, they're certainly very small. They are potentially very dangerous. Now, the current system can track objects that are about the size of the Chicxulub monster. There's even the one that formed the Arizona meteor crater, which, if you've never been there, make a point of driving down and seeing it. Do you know when they first discovered that? They first saw it, the first people moving into that part of Arizona, they thought it was just another mesa. And it was like years and years before somebody decided to ride up the top and look over the edge, and he saw it was this giant hole in the ground. And they called it Canyon Diablo because they thought only the devil could do something like that. But it's a fascinating, fascinating experiment, or experience as it were here. Apparently, police are scuffling with hundreds of South Koreans who are trying to block the deployment of a U.S. terminal high altitude area defense missile. They are not happy about this at all. Apparently, Amazon is now under fire for price gouging in the days before Hurricane Irma. Apparently, they're now selling a case of 24 bottles of water for $179.25. Oh, there's the music. And again, if you're going to donate to help these hurricane victims, I would recommend the Salvation Army. All right, we're going to head on off now. Reminder, John Stedmill will have Catherine Austin Fitz for his radio show, so stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, aloha, America.